So here we go. We're going to wrap up the last of our little cultural regions, areas that we've learned about the Native Americans. We had the desert Southwest. We had the Northwest coast, the Arctic. We just did the Eastern woodlands. And now we're going to finish up here with this lesson on the plains. I got some really cool videos to go along with this. Probably you guys will watch them since this is Friday. You guys will watch them like next Monday when you come back. So we'll get to see those. All right. So here we go. Let's talk about the plains real quick. All right. So lesson five's the plains. Here's what you think of when you think of the plains: the nice, gently rolling little hills there, and the grasslands, and the big blue skies, the wide open. And then we're going to see a lot about these guys, the bison or the buffalo. Depends on which one we're going to call them. So we'll see a lot of that in this lesson too. Okay. All right, so every one of our little regions had some borders, some boundaries. So the plains is the green area here. And on the eastern border, over here to the east by us, the border is the Mississippi River, because that divided them from the eastern woodlands. So the Mississippi River is the eastern boundary, and the Rocky Mountains are the western boundary. Okay, and we're going to see later on, we're going to see this whole plains region sort of get split down the middle, and there's going to be an eastern side to it and a western side, and they do different things, but we'll get to that in a minute. All right, plains are covered in grassy rolling hills, just like we saw there in that first picture. And this area today, we pretty much call this the Midwest. This is out where we think of like the big wheat fields and things of the Midwest where they farm. All right, so we're going to see that. Okay, archaeologists have discovered artifacts on the plains there that date back, at least about 5,000 years ago. So they're able to carbon date some things and stuff like that. So they're thinking at about 5,000 years ago or a little bit longer than that, people started settling on the plains there. All right, and they got some different arrowheads and spear points, kind of the Clovis sort of points. These things here, I think, are like a scraper. I'm going to show you how they would tan like the bison hides and stuff. So just all kinds of different artifacts people have found there. All right, but we don't really know a lot about those people back before the 1500s. Okay, because wasn't until like this year 1541 that this Spanish conquistador came up through Mexico, a guy named Nunez, and he kind of made first contact with the Native Americans out on the plains. We don't really know a lot about them before that because they didn't really have a written form of language. Okay, if you remember the beginning of the year when we talked about why we learn history and stuff, and I told you about those Navajo code talkers during World War II, and they were able to keep our code secret because nobody knew how to speak their language and stuff. So the Native Americans really didn't have a written language. It was passed down through their oral traditions and stuff and their stories. So anything we really know about them back in the early 1500s comes from what the Spanish wrote down about them. So you can't always take that as 100% true either, because the Spanish saw them and they thought they were savages and stuff. So they might have written some not true things. So the only way we really know a lot about them is just passed down through their traditions and their stories about themselves. Okay. All right, you think of the plains, you should automatically think about, the buffalo. And you're going to hear me stumble a little bit here between buffalo and bison, but we're going to kind of say which one we really should be talking about, okay? So that's kind of the big thing out there on the plains was the buffalo or the bison. Okay, the buffalo was basically the lifeblood of the Plains Indians. This is what they survived off of. Without them, without the buffalo, life would have been pretty darn hard for the native peoples. And we're going to see they used it basically for everything when they hunted it. And so very, very important to them. And later on, I'm going to show you a little thing. If you see his tongue sticking out there, buffalo had black tongues. So it's kind of crazy. Most animals have sort of pinkish ones or grayish sort of tongues. Buffalo had black tongues. And we're going to talk later how that was kind of an oddity sort of thing for some people. Okay, scientists and some historians estimate that, back 5,000 years ago when this region sort of started having people living there and inhabiting there, there was probably at least about 5 million buffalo roaming out on the plains. That's an immense number. That's just a huge amount of buffalo out there grazing on the grasslands and stuff. So imagine you're like a Native American, back 5,000 years ago, and you go walk up over this little hill, and next thing you know, you look out, and it's just a sea of brown out there of just millions and millions and millions of buffalo like this. It was just a huge number. So we're going to see how it really, really helped out the earliest native people. And by the end of this, till we get to the end of this lesson, you're going to see, pretty much white man's greed in the late 1800s pretty much over hunted and did things that had the bison buffalo population down to only a couple thousand left out on the plains. I mean, they almost had them to the point of extinction. So we're going to see that towards the end of the lesson. All right, but here's the big debate. Are we calling them the right thing? Are we calling the buffalo or the bison, whatever it is, are we calling that the right thing? Should we be calling by a different name? Well, technically speaking, here's what we're going to see. These guys here, what we are, the Bedford bison. And remember, bison is like deer. It's singular and plural. So you don't say, I see one deer, I see lots of deers. That's not right. You just say there's a bunch of deer. So like bison, say one bison, or there's a bunch of bison. So whoever made our uniforms and put that extra S on the end and said we're the Bedford Bisons, that doesn't make sense. It doesn't sound right. It's like saying you're going to Sheets or Sheetses. A lot of people say that's not right. But anyway, so these guys, like what we are, this is what we technically should be calling what's here in America, the bison. Okay, these guys are buffalo, Cape buffalo or water buffalo, they call them. And I'm going to show you a really complicated scientific explanation here, the difference between the two. So hopefully you can keep up with this. All right, here we go. All right, so here, a bison lives in Europe and North America. They eat grass and they play baseball. And so the buffalo resides in South Asia and a wee bit of Africa, and they like water and football, right? Very, very, very complicated scientific explanation there of how you name these things. Sorry, I'm just kidding. I found that on the internet, thought it was funny. So really what you got is the bison live here in North America, and buffalo, these Cape buffalo or water buffalo, live over in like Africa and kind of like down in India and the Philippines and places like that. So we really should be calling our guys bison out here. So from here on out, I'm going to try to stop saying buffalo and say bison. All right. Okay. How they got the name buffalo over here? Something about just kind of like when the first white people started moving out west and encountering the natives and stuff. They kind of had this word buffalo, and somehow that turned into buffalo, and it just kind of stuck. So we called our thing out there, we called it buffalo for a long time, but it's really bison. Okay. When I was in high school, the bison or the buffalo farm out there past Shellsburg, they had a big old bison called Bentley, the friendly bison. And when we would have homecoming and things up at the football field in the fall there, they would bring him in. They had a trailer and they hauled him in, and he had a little, just kind of like a horse or whatever. He had a little collar thingy with a leash, and they'd bring him out in the middle of the field, and all the homecoming people would walk by him, and he was friendly. You could go up and pet him and everything. But I think the reason they stopped bringing him in was a couple years, because they'd do this during halftime, and a couple years when they were walking him on or off the field, he'd go to the bathroom on the field. He would leave some buffalo chips out there, and they got tired of having to clean those up, I think. So that's kind of a funny story. All right, here's how the ancient Native Americans of the plains, they didn't have horses. Okay, way back 5,000 years ago, maybe there was still some horses, but kind of like the woolly mammoths and the other animals, they went extinct. They were overhunted. They ran out of grasslands to graze on, that kind of stuff. So from like 5,000 years ago up until about 500 years ago, when the Spanish started coming over here, there weren't really a lot of horses out on the plains. And I'm not saying there weren't horses somewhere in North America, here and there, but out on the plains and stuff, there weren't really horses. So like in the 1500s, when the Spaniards came, they brought horses with them from Spain. And some of them got away. The natives would steal some of them, or they would trade with the Spaniards for food, for horses and stuff. And so they didn't have horses. So in the early days, what they would do is, you see this here, and they kind of like are sneaking up on the bison there with their little wolf or coyote hides or whatever on, and you're kind of like, how's that going to work? How they sneak up on them if they're a wolf? Wouldn't the bison run? And this picture always cracks me up. It looks like these two bison are like cross-eyed, googly-eyed, looking at them and stuff. But what they would do is they'd walk up, and then they jump up and scare them. And when you scared the bison, that'd cause a great big stampede. You'd have thousands of bison starting to run, okay? And they would do this twice a year. There was usually like a migration period of in the spring and the fall. So they would hunt them twice a year. So what they would do is they'd sneak up on them, and they'd jump up and they'd scare them, okay? And they would get the bison to start stampeding. But they would do this in a nice, smart, strategic location. So here's how they would actually catch the bison to kill them, to eat them. They'd run them towards a cliff, okay? And then they would have, you could see like guys standing up here. I'm sure they had lots of people in their little village, like waving things around and stuff and trying to get the bison to sort of stampede into a certain area. And they would run them towards a cliff. And, everybody always goes, oh, come on, the bison wouldn't be that dumb to run off a cliff to their death. Think about it. If you're the front couple bison and you got like 1,000 bison behind you stampeding, you're not just going to slam on the brakes real quick and go, stop, guys, stop. Some of them are going to get forced off of the cliff before the others realize it and run off the side. So the natives would be waiting down here, and when the bison fell down and basically were really injured, they'd come in and kind of finish them off with their stone tools and their stone weapons, and then they would butcher them up and take them back and eat them. So this is kind of the way that they hunted the bison before they had horses and stuff. So when you guys come back next week, I'll show you some cool clips from Dances with Wolves where they go on like a bison hunt and stuff. So probably we're gonna end it up on this one here. Native American hunters used every part of and see, I put bison and I took out the buffalo part. So when we come back here, I'll explain a lot of the stuff that they used off of the bison. Okay, so that's part one. Bye.